All right, we are live and we are joined today by the NeuroDrive team and my wonderful members, Miss Jaime A. Heidel and Miss Alexandra Arena. And our special guest today is Miss Chezzy Kennedy from Thrive Mental Health and Wellbeing. And she is a former communication director herself. And I'm telling you guys, we have a powerhouse of women for this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Carole Whittington, founder and principal of Mind Your Autistic Brain, and this is my part of my team for the NeuroDrive team. And we work with companies to help create better, more effective communication, translation, alignment, get everybody out of burnout, no matter your neurotype, and really start that innovation, creative, and growth process that is possible. So guys, I'm going to go around the room, just sort of let everybody introduce themselves, just sort of say, hey, this is maybe my communication style or where I show up in the workplace. We'll kick off with you, our guest, Miss Chezzy Kennedy.
No pressure then. Okay. So yeah, okay, I'm Chezzy Kennedy. My communication style is kind of blunt to the point, no fluff. I'll say what needs to be said, and I am terrible at small talk. It's not that I don't care, I don't know what to say. So
I love that. So you would be what Allie and I would consider a director or a factor. You can fall in both categories there. All right, Miss Allie.
So I am Alexandra Arena, and my communication style is I tend to be a listener, but I don't really speak up when I need to. So I'm not good at saying what I really want to say, which often gets me in trouble. And I also hate small talk, Chezzy. I'll do it, like I'll pretend, but I don't enjoy it. So we're on the same page there.
I think that's probably a good consensus in our room for the most part. All right, Miss Jaime, what is your communication style?
My communication style is very similar to Chezzy's. I am very blunt and to the point. I really can't. I've learned as an autistic ADHD person to kind of tone it down a bit so that I don't come across as blunt, because sometimes I don't mean to. I certainly would like my message to be heard and not the tone of my voice or whatever it is. I want my message to be heard. So I have learned how to adjust my communication style. But yeah, very blunt and to the point. Always have been. And small talk is not my friend. No, never has been.
Small talk can be so like angsty and cringy that I even did a whole video on it like way back when, if you guys want to go dig through the playlist there here on the YouTube channel, there is a thing about why small talk. So I am Carole Whittington, and my communication style is a little bit of all of the four that we're going to be talking about a little bit in just a minute. My default is probably the director. I communicate to move people forward. So I usually am very direct, give the information. I'm also a bit of a captivator. I can be a listener sometimes, depending on the situation. And I'm definitely a factor. I am an Enneagram 5, so I'm all about the information. I'm the investigator. So I love the facts and all the stuff. And, Chezzy and I were having a conversation yesterday, and I really loved this. She said, I really just think that we need to get down to clearer, more concise communication, and we should be able to say things in 5 words. And I thought that was awesome. I'm like, yes. And if that's the case, if that would really help communication, I asked Chezzy, I was like, what would be like the top 5 words that you would choose to share? And Chezzy, I'd love for you to sort of share, what would those top 5 words be?
now you're relying on my executive functioning for me to remember what I said yesterday, which...
Well, I had to ask you because I couldn't remember. I just remembered it was really good. So I'm just going to be honest.
I think I remember I said it depends for the situation. So that if you're wanting something done, you need to say what you want done, when you want it done by, and kind of like why you want it done if that's appropriate, and how you want it done. Being really clear and setting that, because if you use words like would you mind, if possible, no rush, they are such confusing words. Sometimes people use those words to add politeness. That's not polite, that's confusing, because you're then going to get annoyed with me when I didn't get around to doing it at the time that you wanted, but you didn't tell me that time. So yeah.
Ooh, the subtext. You led us perfectly into our first part of this conversation. We're talking all about communication between different brains at work. And just so you know, guys, this just doesn't apply at work. This applies in all your relationships between different brains. So this is going to be helpful in every aspect of your life. So there are 4 levels of communication. Number 1 is what we mean to say. Number 2 is the next level is what you actually say. Number 3 is what the other person hears you say. And it's going through their filter. And the last level of communication is what the other person thinks you mean, the interpretation, like the story they're telling themselves in their head. And Chezzy just like really illustrated this so beautifully. It's like, oh, well, just when you get a chance, could you do this for me? And you mean to say, I need this done. What you actually say is, well, if you have a chance, could you do this? So you preface it trying to soften what you're asking for. So the other person hears you saying this, and through their filter, they're like, oh, it's not a priority because it's just when I get a chance. Well, I may or may not get a chance to do this today. And the other person, you're like, oh, okay. So they think you're going to do it maybe. Or they think, oh, they understand that I really mean I need you to do this like in the next 30 minutes. But I don't say that. How often does that communication breakdown happen at work?
I also think even the reverse of that, right? Like I have a to-do list, so I'm trying to offload things on my to-do list and I'm giving it to people, but I genuinely mean you can do it the next week. I just want it off my to-do list, but it doesn't get communicated. You use a phrase like, yeah, when you get a chance, and people have learned to interpret that as, oh, you need me to do this immediately. So I've really started, my husband actually let me know every time I gave him something, he would immediately do it because that's his brain. I don't get anything done quickly. He does. So I had to really clarify, oh no, I'm just asking if you can get this done like this month. It's not high priority. I just need out of my brain and into yours so I know it gets done. So you have to overly communicate it.
I have to say, as an autistic ADHD person, especially as an autistic person, I find Carole, Gina, what you were just saying about the four ways, I find that exhausting. Because I say what I mean and I mean what I say. So when there's all these layers and nuances, I didn't learn those things until I was in my 30s. I had no idea so I didn't understand why I would say one thing and somebody would interpret it in a completely different way. And then their response back to me was so shocking that I struggle with trauma and short-term memory. So if they had a big enough response, I'd actually forget what I had just said. So then it was a whole thing. So I listen to you and I listen to that's how people communicate. And I'm just like, but why? And then of course we're going to get into why. It's just why do you do that? So I just had to put that in there.
Jamie, so glad you did.
I have to say, Jamie, my wife and I were married for 3 years before I realized that fine didn't mean fine. So now we have this saying, I'll say, if I say I'm fine, I'm fine. But now we have this saying of, are you fine or is this girly fine? And girly fine means I'm stewing on it. You better say sorry and find another way.
That's a really good word. Fine is one of those words that definitely doesn't actually mean fine for most people. Yeah, but Jamie, you bring up a good point. It is exhausting. And I don't even know, I guess neurotypically people just do it so quickly. They don't realize that they're going through those 4. Because if I actually had to cognitively think about that, that would be really stressful. But yeah, and I think also there's society kind of saying to say things politer and you never want to be that direct. So then people have gone out of their way to not be direct. I think we're getting slightly better about that, but a long way to go.
So Allie, you bring up something I think is an important conversation as we're having this communication in the workplace conversation today. And it's the societal norms and conventions for women And when we're neurodivergent, neurodistinct women in the workplace, one of the things that I have noticed, not just for myself, but that I also hear coming back to me from my coaching clients who are in the Burnout to Thriving for the foundations. And it's the burnout is happening because I feel like I have to do all these things. I should be doing all these things, not just at work, but at home. And I should be able to, what was that commercial back in the 80s, bring home the bacon fried up in the pan. And I never forget you're my man kind of thing. It's like juggling all this stuff. And we really are not taking into account what our needs are, what our energy needs are, what is an energy drain for us. When we're talking about the workplace, there's so many cultural and societal things to sort of navigate. And our communication style often is trying to deliver things in a softer way, sort of that kind, gentle way, because when we deliver it in our natural, direct, very blunt way, the reflection that we get back, the response we get back is, man, why are you being so mean? Why are you being a witch with a B? And then it's like, oh, don't say anything to her. No, you don't want her on your team. She's a witch. She's not nice. And it's like, wow, how do we start navigating that part, guys? I want to hear it from all of you on this one.
Or Carole Jean, I was just going to say, or you can be seen as a complainer because you actually give your opinion, right? Or not a team player, right? So if you say something like pretty directly, I won't have time to finish that today, as opposed to, today's a little busy. I'll make sure it's in your inbox by 8 a.m., right? Same, pretty much the same thing, but that directness can be seen as, I don't want to get it done, or I'm complaining. When in reality, the person's just actually forming a boundary and is letting you know it won't happen today.
Chezzy, Jamie, you guys got something to weigh in on this one for sure.
I don't know. You're right. That was another thing that I don't think I realized was that, it's kind of funny because I am, you look at me, and especially when I was younger, I always looked younger than I was. And I have the curly hair and I've got the pale skin and I look like a freaking doll, and I'm short too. So when I was younger, people, especially when I was at work, they expected something completely different from me just from looks alone. I dress very feminine. That's just how I am. It's my natural way of being. And I think that people just thought, oh, she's just this, demure, soft little woman. And I was anything but. And I remember one time, this was about 10 years ago, I was working at a grocery store, and I guess I spoke or something, like I just said, hello, how was your day? Or something like that. And the person looked so taken aback. And this was when I was living in the South for a little while. The person was so taken aback, and they're like, I didn't expect your voice to be that deep. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Because I know for a woman, I probably do have a deep voice, but I don't care. And I don't really notice it. And that's when I was like, oh my God. So then I started reflecting and thinking back on the times when this, what you would believe in your mind is this 5'3" demure curly haired woman walking up to you and being like, yeah, I can't get that done today. Sorry. Like they were seeing one thing on the outside and they were getting something totally different, or something totally different when I spoke. But I didn't understand the disconnect at all. So I didn't understand why people were reacting to me the way they were reacting to me, because I didn't meet their expectations. And so I didn't understand for a long time that, especially certain men don't like to have, just be spoken to directly by a woman, especially if they're in a hierarchical position of power. And I was direct with everybody. It didn't matter if the person didn't matter what gender they were, it didn't matter what age they were. And I was constantly getting called into offices about my tone or my attitude, and never did I ever understand what they were talking about. So yes, I have definitely experienced that.
Chezzy, what do you have to weigh in on this one?
Well, I see, it's got me thinking of a different scenario. It kind of made me think, well, actually, that particular issue, I don't think it's just for neurodivergent females, because I've been was talking to a friend of mine. She's a lady of color, and she was saying the exact same thing happens to her, and she's accused of being aggressive and argumentative when she's not. And it's almost like there's so many biases and judgments that we have as a society, so it goes much deeper than just females, isn't it? And certainly when we think of children, I've done a lot of work with parents who have autistic children, and I've always said to them, I said, well, are they being really controlling, or are they showing leadership? It's like, it's how you flip it and how you want to look at it, isn't it? And it's same for females. So like you say, it's okay for a guy to stomp around chucking his weight, and it's, oh yes, it's just Bob. But if a female does it, it's like, ooh. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, you make such a good point there. And I have a good friend that works at Google, and he said, I don't know if it's just my neurodistinct self, and I just really don't see the hierarchical separation. He said, I've probably had more interesting conversations, but I've also gotten pulled in by my direct managers and things to kind of like go, dude, you can't just go over our head, and you can't just go up to the C-suite and go have this conversation in the elevator just because you ran into the guy, or because the same person, or you're playing tennis at the same club or something. That you don't do that. And he's just like, what do you mean I don't do that? We got a problem. We've been trying to solve it. He's right there. Why wouldn't I say something, right?
Absolutely. We had a big Thrive management meeting just a couple of months ago, and we had the whole team, which was amazing. There was like 15 of us in a room, and because of COVID, that hadn't happened for a long time. And we had a special guest come, and he was from he's very high established in business. And he was asking all these questions. And to be honest, he was using a lot of fancy words. And he said to me something about, have we checked our verticals, I think it was, or something like that. And I just looked at him and went, what are you talking about? What is a vertical? And the whole room, just a pin could have dropped. And then afterwards, people come up to me and, oh, you were so brave saying that to him. And I was just like, didn't occur to me.
Oh my God, Jamie, please chime in on this one.
Oh God, the so brave thing. No, that's hilarious. I know Carole, Jean, and I have talked about people who are saying, wow, you're so brave. I can't believe you spoke up and said that. And I'm just looking at people like, I don't know what you're talking about. I had an experience, about 15 years ago now, that I told Carole, Jean, and I actually told on another talk show, and this is going to become like my famous experience here. Is that I was working at an insurance company back in, I want to say, the mid 2000s. And I had a manager that I just wasn't comfortable with. My direct supervisor, there was something about the way she spoke to me. I don't know what it was, but I just wasn't comfortable talking to her or going to her when I needed something. So I guess there was something that I needed, or something that wasn't being understood by this particular supervisor. So I just literally walked over to the next cubicle and started talking to her manager. And I got along with her really well, which was funny because other people didn't seem to get along with her, and they were intimidated by her. And I loved her. I was like, she is so no nonsense. She's direct. I'm just going to talk to her. And I talked to her, and I told her whatever was going on. I can't imagine what it was at this point. And the next thing I knew, I think like the next day, or maybe a couple days later, I got called into the conference room with my supervisor and this woman sitting there, both of them, and they're looking at me like I had just done something horrible. And I believe her name was Elaine. My direct supervisor was like, "You," and this was even worse because she started using figurative language, and she goes, "There's something about you that really gets my back up. It really sets my teeth." And I'm like, "What are you saying?" Like, and then I couldn't ask what she meant by that. So I am picturing all of these things in my head that I don't know what that means. And so I think probably at 24, I probably did ask, what does that mean? What do you mean back your teeth up? I got the two confused or something. I don't remember. And that basically the thing is they were trying to say to me, you need to go through the chain of command. Like you can't go over my head and go to Norma, I think was her name, maybe. You can't go to her. You have to come to me first. And I swear to God, I looked right at this woman. I said, but you didn't do anything. And she was like, I guess that her back got up and her teeth got set and she was just rigor mortis at that point because she was just so
she's going, you just ran me over with the bus.
Oh my God. But I swear on everything in this world, I had no idea what was so wrong about what I had done or what I was doing. And they tried explaining it to me, and Norma, the really blunt one, I think her name was Norma. You could see like now looking back, she was suppressing laughter the whole time. And Elaine or Elise, it was Elise. And she was just like the whole time. And I was so confused. And she hated me from that day forward. She didn't like me to begin with, but then she really didn't like me. And I didn't get it. And it took me like 15 years to figure out what I had done, supposedly wrong. So yeah, I understand I can't believe you said that. I was like, but why would I not say it? I don't understand. Okay.
Well, I have to give credit to the guy, because after the meeting, he came up to me and he actually thanked me. And he said, oh, I really appreciate the way that you just called it like it was, because he's made me realize I need to be careful of my language. So fair play to him. He's now a great part of our team and we communicate regularly, but he communicates so I can understand him, which is great.
Oh, Chezzy, you bring up such an important part of what we're talking about today when we're talking about communication in different brains in the workplace. And one of the things that studies time and time again are showing are that the cultures and the companies that have open door and truly open door communication, where hierarchy and going through the chain of command really is not the norm. There's more of an open communication from person to person so that everyone is sort of getting on the same page, and the people that need to know the information are getting the information, and it's not getting filtered and diluted and convoluted through 4 or 5 layers to get to them. They're actually getting from the source information. Those companies are more innovative. Those companies are more successful. Those companies have higher retention rates for employees. Those companies have loyalty. And that's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation, because we want all of our companies, all of our employees, all of our network here to be successful in this way. And communication is at the heart of how we grow and connect, how we serve, and how we help. Jamie.
Sorry about that. I definitely have something to say about the chain of command thing, is that, how you were talking about the hierarchy where you go from, this person to this person to this person. We learned in kindergarten that doesn't work. Remember playing telephone? How did we mess that up as a society? How did we make the game of telephone, which we learned did not work in kindergarten, the status quo in business? Somebody would say, I have a purple dress on. And by the time it got to the 10th person, it was, I pet a giraffe. We learned this in kindergarten. So I just had to say, we need to go back and reevaluate the whole chain of command. And I'm glad that companies are doing this. But if you go through a bunch of different people, and like you were talking about, Carole Jean, with your 4, I'm not sure what to call them, but the communication styles, it's what you hear, what you expect to hear. I mean, you're going through 4 different people. By the time the message gets to where it's going, it's already been lost. So I'm not sure how that managed to translate. And that's how we do things in business. And that's the status quo, because it doesn't really make any sense.
I think that sort of leads us into this next place so beautifully. Thank you, Jamie. We have these 4 levels of communication, and that's 4 places for the communication and understanding and connection between 2 people or more to go sideways, to kind of go off the rails a little bit, to get misinterpreted, misunderstood, filtered through other things that then make it a little different than what was actually said and maybe what we intended to say. So one of the other elements, it's a big component of communication. We're going to kind of help you guys do this today. Ali's going to share this. This is from our neurodiverse communication ecosystem. And we have 4 communication styles. And we can use, and we sort of talked as we introduced ourselves at the beginning, what our communication style was. So we want to help you guys sort of identify your primary communication style and how that might be playing into those 4 levels of communication. So Ali, let's start with the director. What is a director communicator? What are some of the characteristics?
So I think I just also want to just clarify as we're going through these, Carole, Jean, and I don't believe one style is better than the other, right? So there's not like a superior communication style. No one's doing a wrong communication style. It's just, let's be honest, we all communicate different, right? So I think it's helpful if you start to realize, like, if Jaime and Chezzy are both more director communication styles, the people who are communicating with you truly just interpret it as she's being direct. She's not being mean. She's not trying to give me information, just sort of seeing it for what it is. And the value in it. So like a director, it really think more that like CEO mode, right? So it's a very action oriented type conversation. They're not going to put a lot of feelings into what they're saying. They're okay with conflict if it needs to happen. They might answer first. They're not people that are always going to share like personal anecdotes about what they're communicating. But these are people who they're going to make the sale. They're probably going to close that meeting. They're really good at delegating. They also have energy to keep conversations going. They're really good timekeepers. They will definitely collaborate, but they need to see what the benefit is, right? So why are we collaborating on this? What is the end goal? They want to be heard. They do want to be heard. Sometimes they could have a little difficulty with feedback, so it might need to be delivered in a way that they can receive it. And they expect a lot from themselves and others. So that's a captivator. I have here, like, again, CEOs, think presidents, Elon Musk, entrepreneurs, stuff like that. And I should also say
that's the director, right?
I'm sorry, that's the director. Yes. I should also say most people are like 1 or 2. You're not just really like only solely one communication style. The next one would be a captivator. So this person is going to be, they're going to be more empathetic. They kind of appear open, like they're going to be good listeners. They ask curious questions. This is really important. They have full responsibility of their words. So they really do say what they mean, and they're very intentional about it. When they're listening to understand what's going on, and then they'll want to solve it. They love to be inspired. They're really great gut feelers. They're very respectful, supportive. They like to add value. They might say phrases like, I know exactly what you mean. And to them, the relationship is kind of the primary part of why we're communicating. They really want to maintain that relationship. So these people might be healers, therapists, some ADHDers, I think definitely can fall into this category, or this type of communication style. Carole Jean, do you want me to just keep going and do the other 2?
Yeah, I kind of want to give a shout out to everybody that's like joining us here. So who was kind of identifying as a director, like that first one? Like you're given the information to sort of move things forward. You're the director. Who drop it in the chat. Let us know. Are you a director? And then that last one, that was the captivator, right?
Yeah.
So who is identifying as a captivator here? Like, is that feeling like, ooh, that kind of fits? That's me for sure. That's definitely maybe my primary. In all of these, like Ali said, you're probably going to pick out little bits and pieces that's you in all 4 of these. So definitely just sort of be open here. I'm kind of checking the chat to see who is saying, hey, this is me over here. And by the way, this is a live chat only, so the chat will not be available for the replay here for anybody to see. So you're welcome to ask questions and engage, and it is all just for right now when we're live. All right, Allie, what's our next communication style?
Okay, so our next one is a listener. This is the one I said I probably resonate with the most. So these people can be really in their head, like they're really thinking about things. They can be very conflict averse. So they're intentional with their words, but they also be critical of themselves, right? Not to offend anyone. They are very good at listening. They're listening a lot, but they're not always voicing, their opinions or their feelings, right? They tend to be very cooperative. They're calm. They're going to be very aware of their tone, of their body language, because again, they don't want to insult the communication partner. For them, the communication is a lot about the communication partner. They are, they have really good energy. They're encouraging. They're really fun to be around. So I was saying this type of person, think of like Lucille Ball, Oprah, Robin Williams. Again, so they're really good, really great listening, but where it can get difficult is they're not actually always expressing how they feel. So that can be an issue over time, right? If you're not really saying how you feel. And then our last one is a factor. So a factor is someone who is, they can get stuck on one topic. They're very analytical. Like this person's going to be amazing at Excel, numbers, definitely more of an engineering brain. They can come across as having lack of emotion because they're concerned with the numbers, the outcome, right? I think there are actually people who care deeply about what they're talking about, but they really just want to get it right. So it can be very perfectionistic and wanting to make sure they have all the information. These people are not judgmental. They're really just collecting facts. They're devil in the details. They love the details. So this might be a person, I know Jamie, we're probably going to talk about this, that might ask why a lot, like really trying to get to the bottom of why are you, like, what are we doing here? I need all the information. A factor also might not be able to move forward unless they have the who, what, when, where, why, right? So they can't just have half a task. They need to understand fully why we're going to do this. And they appreciate compliments. They tend to be amazing workers because they really care about what they're working on and they want to complete it in the best way possible. These people particularly do not like small talk. And when they collaborate, it's for the greater good of the project. And they're also very open to feedback because again, they care about the project so much. So I have an example would be like Bill Gates or Albert Einstein. I think I need a few more examples for all of these, but so yeah, I'm wondering, is anyone really resonating with one of them now that I've gone through? And I know sometimes it's easier with a visual. We'll do that next time, Carole Jean. It's hard to remember.
Yeah, I was having trouble with my share thing today with the visual. So Patty said that she is definitely a director. I want to get stuff done. That I consider it efficient communication, but others sometimes think it's terse or rude.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to write that. I like the word efficiency. Yeah. So I'm also, Carole Jean and I are still playing with the words because I think director definitely captivates what I'm saying, but director can have a negative connotation, right? And I don't think that communication style is negative. So we're trying to still figure out like what the names are.
Efficient sounds good.
I kind of like that.
Good.
Yeah.
That's
I like
got
that
an
a lot.
intent.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I do like the emotional, sorry about that, Carole Jean.
I froze.
In listening to all of the descriptions, it sounds like I have all of those. Like it sounds like director would be more my thing, but then the second one kind of sounded like me in a lot of ways. And so did the factor. So that I feel I don't feel pulled to anyone specifically, but probably the most blunt would be me. But then I've never been the greatest listener. I'll be honest about that. But so that probably doesn't resonate with me as well. But definitely the factor and the director. But then the other one, I can't think of the name of it, Allie.
The Captivator.
The Captivator. I feel like a combination of the Captivator director, like that to me feels like me. But I mean, even the factor definitely resonates with me, because I am a why kind of questioner. So I can understand, that helps me to understand what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't know. I kind of resonate with most of them.
I think you're bringing up a good point though. I would say like director and factor are kind of the most, severe is not the word I want to use, but most defined maybe, right? Like most, and so people tend to be one of those plus listener or captivator, like they can see where they are together in those. And again, it's really all we're trying to talk about here is just, we all do communicate differently. So if you start to understand, like, for example, my husband is a factor. I'm a listener. I'm also really bad ADHD. So I'm just like, yeah, okay, I stopped listening 20 minutes ago, but he can't move forward unless he has all the information. So I used to find it annoying when he would be like, but wait, why are we doing this? And when do we go? And when does the flight have to be? And I was just like, oh my God, are you kidding? But once I saw it as like, this is a need he has to like actually do what he needs to do, it made it a lot easier. Yeah.
Oh, Chezzy, I see you got something going on. You're thinking, what you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking with like the word director, I was saying, well, I'm more of like a the word's just gone straight out of my head now. A purposeful. I speak for a purpose. And I think that's where, and I know I'm very bad at doing that, particularly with my kids now, they're teenagers. And I have to really check myself that sometimes I'm not only talking to them to ask them to do something or to moan at them, which I'm really bad at, because I just think I need to talk for more than just the purpose. But that's my default.
Ooh, that's a good one. So we got a bunch of chat stuff going on. People going, hey, this is me. So hey, Jesse's here. Oh, good to see you, Jesse. So Jesse said that he is definitely the factor. Like he's looking for the why, he's looking for all the information for stuff. Jessica said that she's definitely the fourth category, factor, but also looking for efficiency, looking for the efficiency of conversation. Oh, I love this. Bo says he loves to listen and work hard to improve that skill. Most important skill in leadership is listening to what someone is saying, not saying and needs and wants. I'm definitely a factor. Analysis paralysis. That is definitely one of those in the factor world. I can attest to that one, but I'm an excellent planner, risk assessor. Oh, I love the combination of how everybody's sort of bringing in their different communication styles. So guys, as we're talking about and sort of everyone's identified sort of the layers of communication and sort of now your variations in style, because remember your style also shows up depending on who you're talking to, what the situation is. And we maybe have started to have some of the conversations about what happens in a team when you're at work and you've got a whole table of folks with different communication styles. What are some of your thoughts on this one, Chezzy? What are we doing when we're in a team, we're trying to work together, and let's say the factor is asking a lot of why questions and everybody else in the room might be directors or captivators or listeners? How are we navigating this when we start to experience these different communication styles?
Well, I guess there is the key, is we need to be early on discovering and having a space so that we can find out what is your preferred communication style, but also, excuse me, there's the way you like to communicate yourself and the way you like to receive communication. They can be very different. So having that conversation. So if you know somebody just wants all the questions asked, you can say, okay, let's just take 2 minutes. We're going to answer all the questions and we can all move on. And chances are there's other people in the room anyway who have got questions they just don't want to ask them. So I would kind of really, if you've explained it well in the first place, there shouldn't be as many questions. So kind of factor that in as what is all the information that people need first off. You don't get prizes for keeping stuff to yourself. And like the best managers that I've had have been ones who've shared everything. The worst manager I ever had was someone who, she could see that I was very good at my job, so didn't want to upskill me. She didn't want me to learn things because she was threatened by me. And that's not helpful either.
We had a lot of comments in the DMs coming to the NeuroDrive team and Mind Your Autistic Brain yesterday when we were asking some questions about what are some of the things that you've experienced at work, like losing hours without being told why? You know, have you gotten a demotion and never had it explained to you? Have you been dismissed from a position and never really told why? It just felt like it was out of the blue. And often that was one of the things that I kept hearing in the conversation that kept coming up so much yesterday, Chezzy. And I love that you brought this up because I think it's such a big part of this conversation when we're talking about different brains and communication at work. And I am really good at this one area. And, it's like, what's the ego check and what's the purpose in this team and how are we understanding one another? And are we looking to compete? Are we looking to work? Is it a you versus them, or is it an us versus the problem mentality of, are we solving the problem? Are we really a team? And I think, starting off with just sort of setting the container of, like what we do in the NeuroDrive team, it's like, hey guys, what's your peak performance hour? What's your preferred communication styles? How do you like to receive information? What works best for your brain? And one of the things that comes up a lot is for those who are primary factor communicators, and those people need the why. And Jamie's going to talk about this in a minute, especially if in a different brain perspective. But even if you are a neuromajority brain and you're not a neurodistinct brain, you can still be a factor. You can still be the person asking why. And on teams, so often that's misinterpreted. When we're talking about that interpretation piece of communication, and it's that person is so annoying. Why are they asking all these questions? Don't they get it? It's all right there on the piece of paper. Well, no, they're asking questions that you probably should be asking. You just don't think to ask them because they're seeing things that you're not seeing. And they're asking that question for a purpose. They're asking that question because they see something or there's a part missing for them that needs to be filled in. And Chezzy, you make a really good point about as a manager, as a leader, and Bo brought this up, we have to listen. And if someone's asking a lot of clarifying questions about information, we have to ask ourselves, did we communicate effectively? Did we provide enough information? And a lot of times what doesn't happen, but what really needs to happen, and in really effective teams, this does happen, is the leader, when you're planning, doesn't just rely solely on their own perspective. They take what they have, they show it to people they know are going to look at it from different perspectives and say, hey, what might I be missing before I take this before the whole group? So that we can make sure the information is here. And that people feel like sometimes that takes too much time. We'll work it out in the room. But really what you're doing is you're creating more chaos and you're not effectively using your time, because it might take a few minutes to have a conversation with 2 or 3 people on your team that might see it differently. And then boom, it's in your outline, it's in your notes. And that's a whole different, much higher level meeting when you show up like that. Right?
Carole Jean, I just want to say you kind of highlighted like, and this is something I know we want to do in NeuroDrive, and I'm sure it's the same way as at Thrive, like thinking about how conversation works differently, right? Like, so actually someone asking why is almost like a superpower. You want that person on the team, because to what Jamie would just put in the chat, like it's a prevention mechanism. It's actually a really powerful thing, but you as a manager have to recalibrate and see that's not a threat. They're not saying my product's bad. They're not saying what the information I'm giving is wrong. It has to be, oh, I'm seeing this as actually, this is a benefit to everyone, that someone can question, what's a blind spot. But that takes someone being really okay with feedback within themselves and kind of less ego, right? Like, and saying like, all right, wait, maybe someone has a point. So yeah, I know Jamie, you want to talk about that a little more.
I definitely do. Back to it kind of all goes back to how people are perceived based on their appearance and based on their gender, their age, their hierarchical, their rank in a company. Again, being me, when I was younger and in the workforce and didn't have any idea what was going on, I would often ask questions of people's, and it was clarifying questions. You know, for me, in my head, it was like, the way my brain works and the way I process information is, if you give me, it's kind of hard to explain. Let me think about this for a second. Let's say you give me a step that there's 1 through 5, and I have to do step 1 through 5 in order to produce whatever product it is that you need me to produce, or whatever it is you need me to do. A lot of the times, because of polite communication, step 1 is given, step 3 is given, and step 5 is given, but we skip a few things. We skip 2 and 4. And I think that neuromajorative brains can fill in those gaps better, because there's something about the neuromajorative brain that can take 1, 3, and 5, and 2 and 4 is implied. And so it all forms together in a cohesive whole for them. But autistic, and I think ADHD people as well, we are not top-down thinkers or bottom-up thinkers. So we need all of the information. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 spelled out for us. And a lot of times people have this idea, especially with neurodistinct brains, is that to spell it out is to be condescending. So if I give you 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I give it to you piece by piece, it's like I'm talking to a 5-year-old, and I don't want to talk down to you, and I don't want to be condescending. So when you turn around and you ask questions, not only are you maybe making the person feel threatened, but I think a lot of things are going through their heads. I think it's that they're like, how can you not know this? It's obvious, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. And also, if I explain it anymore, if I go deeper into the explanation, it's going to sound like I'm talking to her like she's 5. And also, there's another component to that, which may be just the ego component, like Ali was saying, is that the person is like, well, why are they questioning me? And I think if you're worried about being condescending, or you think it's obvious, okay, so that doesn't bother me as much if you think like you're worried about being condescending. Okay, I can understand that. I don't like the concept of that's obvious, because if it was obvious, I wouldn't be asking the question. And I've said that many times. And of course, I sound rude when I say it, but it's like, you know, someone will say something to me and I'll say, but why? Or asking for clarification on a step, and they're like, it's obvious. And I will literally look at them and say, if it was obvious, why would I ask you the question? And then I would be considered rude or insubordinate. And it's just like, I can't handle that. I never could handle that. I was just like, and then you can't ask why you can't ask questions, because that in and of itself is a question. So I think that's part of the problem for me, is that there are so many layers to questions. And one of the ones that bothers me the most is the ego. When someone thinks, if someone's asking me a question, they must be undermining my authority. And that has caused so many problems, because if I don't have every single step and it's not all laid out for me clearly, I won't understand how to do my job. So then I'm going to walk away trying to figure it out and trying to put those steps together in my head. I'm going to make a mistake, come back 2 hours later, and then they're going to be even more irritated and go, well, why didn't you ask questions? And then my head explodes.
Chezzy, please weigh in on this one.
So one of the things when we're doing our training is we'll often say to people, when you're communicating and you're trying to explain something new, a new concept or a new idea, imagine that English or whatever language you're speaking is not the native first language. Because if you were having a conversation with somebody and you knew English wasn't their first language, you would automatically say it in 5 words. You'd be clear. You wouldn't be patronizing, unless you're that person who speaks louder because you think that's going to help. But you would change your communication style. So and like Jamie said, it's not about your ego. It's about helping the person to understand and be clear. And that's kinder. And you're empowering the person because you've communicated so that they can understand.
And one of the things that I do want to address directly is the concept of supervisors and bosses seeing it as a challenge to authority. I think that that's usually where the biggest hangup comes in. It's not the I don't want to be condescending to this person, or geez, this is obvious. Why are they asking questions? Are they messing with my head? Because all of those can be problematic. But the belief, and I think this is a very common belief, that someone who's considered subordinate to me, asked me a question about why I do things. And that's considered a threat or like a direct challenge to authority, which causes a reaction that can be really problematic. I mean, this person can suddenly be ousted, rejected, that like you were talking about, Carole Jean, that their hours cut, a demotion, even fired because they asked a question and somebody was that offended by it. So asking a simple question can literally put someone's livelihood on the line. And I think that's the most important part, is when you have such an what I would deem as an extreme reaction to a question, and then somehow the person gets blacklisted in your company because they're known as the question asker. Yeah, people lose jobs over that. And then if you lose your job, you can't pay your bills. And I mean, really, that can have really, really negative consequences. So it's something that I think should be addressed in the workforce. And I'd love for all of you to speak on that, because I think it's a common issue that nobody really talks about.
You know, Jamie, I was just thinking, I was on with a client before, and I had to check myself because they were asking me something and I didn't get it and I didn't know how to answer it and I didn't have the information, and there was a part of me that kind of wanted to bypass or like bring it back to something I felt more comfortable talking about, right? But instead I really had to pause and say, I don't have all the information and I can tell that's confusing you. And now you have an open loop. I think it's better if you give me a second, I'm going to reach out to people and we reconvene after. So, you know, I think also that's really, while working with people, this has really helped me understand when you don't answer the question, there's an open loop in their brain. Like there really is something continually trying to fill that in. And then they're searching for ways to fill it in, and you're just creating like a harder cognitive load. Like that visual, for whatever reason, has really helped me understand how important it is to make sure people have all the information. And I think it's also, you know, if you're an ADHDer like me, I actually have a hard time breaking down tasks. Like I live in step 10. I don't normally go 1 through 5. I just all of a sudden I'm at step 7. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I just go really quick. So I think it's also, to your point, Jamie, being okay with saying, I don't know if I can actually explain that. Like, I think we need to ask someone else, because I can't, like my brain doesn't know how to break it down into smaller components. I just know how to get here. I think that's important too. And people don't like admitting that because that might feel inferior, right? Like, you're asking me something that I can't answer and now I feel uncomfortable. So it really is that pause and checking.
Chezzy, what are your thoughts on this?
I was thinking that it's right, and it's okay to say, I don't have the answer to that. And that's such an empowering thing. And I've done it many times during my training. I'm always saying, any questions, please ask. And if I generally don't know, I will say, do you know what? I don't know. That's a really good question. And you can either flip it back and say, what do you think? Or I'll find out for you, because then you've almost got more credibility. And there have been times, and I'm very privileged that I'm a trainer. So I let people know that I'm neurodiverse. I'm aware that I'm quite safe because people pay me because I'm me and because I'm the way I am. But there has been situations that I've delivered training before, and someone was asking me something, and I felt quite agitated by them, because what they were asking just wasn't aligned, or saying wasn't aligned with my values. And in the end, I just had to say, I'm sorry, I don't have the social skills for this, because I knew it was a difficult situation. And I knew if I went my way, we'd lose a contract. And I knew I had to be professional. I was just like, I don't have the social skills for this. Unfortunately, The other people around the table were able to say, yeah, let's just leave that and move on, because they felt uncomfortable with it as well. But yeah, it's just speaking up, I think. But as you say, it's not always easy to do if your job's on the line.
Oh man, and we've got some great comments here in the chat. I'm going to kind of catch the group up here because we're on Zoom here broadcasting to YouTube. So the analogy with someone whose first language isn't English is powerful, and that's new to me. Oh, good one, Chezzy. See, you already making a shift here. A secure leader should not be concerned with a subordinate asking why. That's an opportunity to have a deeper conversation. Why do you ask? How can I help you understand where I'm coming from? And one of the most powerful statements that you can make, especially, and Allie and I use this in our de-escalation protocol in our communication ecosystem, when you're in an emotionally charged or you're feeling the feels coming up, this is feeling like this is getting to be tense, awkward, and uncomfortable sometimes. Sometimes the thing that you can ask someone is just tell me more. Tell me more. I want to understand. Tell me more. I don't quite get it there, but I'm starting to, and I want to learn more. Can you tell me more about why you're asking this, or what your thoughts are on this? Because ultimately, we all want to be seen, heard, and understood. And I think you bring up such a powerful point here, Chezzy, and that is, what are our values? Are we in alignment? And hey, I'm the alignment director here, folks. So I'm going to talk about how do we align. And it starts with, well, what are our personal values? Like, what's our personal brand? What are our personal values? What are we bringing to work? As my friend Tracy Borson says. And the other question is, what are the values within our culture, in our company culture? And is it communicated across the entire company that this is truly what we value as a company, that we're having active and engaged conversations with everyone? I mean, from the people that have been there from the beginning to the new hires and everyone in between, because when we're not actively having conversations around what we value as a company, and also what are the people in our workforce valuing? The people on our team, the person that works next to us. When we start to have those conversations, then we're going to be more in alignment. We're going to understand people's motivations and their why a whole lot better. And we're going to be a lot less critical, a lot less judgmental. We're going to be a lot less offended easily, because we're going to understand that, hey, that's something this person really values. Like, that's their personal brand value. And our company values this. And this is sort of how they work together, because they don't have to be the same to be in alignment. There just has to be conversation that's connecting, where everybody's understanding. And we don't get to a place of understanding without effective and authentic communication. Oh man. Okay. The chat's going crazy again. We got some good ones here. If you were to look up the word red, you would come up with many seemingly unrelated photos, but they actually are red. Oh, that's so good. I had a friend use, words are powerful, and I love words. I'm a word kind of girl. I mean, I am the person that asked for the unabridged dictionary for my 20th birthday because I tote it around with me everywhere, guys. I love words, linguistics. And Daniel Pink, who I absolutely adore, he has a new book out called The Power of Regret. And his background is he's also studied language and in linguistics. And he was having this really amazing conversation with Brene Brown, and I was listening to the interview. And he was talking about the meaning of words, the power that words have. But here's the thing. The power that one word has for us is based in our history and our experience in our life. And that's our filter. That's one of those levels of communication. And the person on the other side, you might say beach. And to me, I'm thinking of the white sandy beaches on the Gulf Coast, because that's where I grew up. But if I say beach to Jamie, she may be thinking about, a rocky East Coast shoreline. And those are both beaches, but they're very different beaches. So what one word means to me and what might carry an emotional charge with it might be something very different for the other person. So part of this conversation we're having today is just bringing some awareness into this. So values are a critical part of culture, but how many organizations teach their values and culture regularly? Exactly my point. Exactly my point. Yes, yes, yes. And more yes to that. It takes, yeah. Oh my gosh. We got you guys are great. I love it. The chat is amazing. This chat is amazing. So, all right. So guys, if we had to point out, like if we're really like digging into where breakdowns and miscommunication happens in work between different brains, what would be your number one thing? You're like, this is probably the biggest thing I see all day long. This is like the biggest challenge that people face communicating between different neurotypes. For you, Chezzy, what would that be?
For me, it would be that when a communication has gone wrong, the person who feels wronged or upset doesn't deal with it then at that moment with the person. They take it off to somebody else and they will say, oh, do you know this? Do you know that? Yeah, I think that about them too. Then they go to somebody else. Then before you know it, you've got a real toxic culture of nobody wants to speak with Rishi because he's blunt, he's not very nice, or bloody, when actually nobody's actually said to him, would you mind if we can maybe communicate in a slightly different way? Or if you wouldn't mind saying please when you ask us to do something. It's not a big deal, yet it gets blown into a big deal. And that then it's that whole like snowball effect, isn't it? Where it could have been dealt with, and before you know it, you've got a toxic feeling, and then you've got low morale, and early intervention is the key with bad communication.
Ooh, I don't think we could have we could just drop the mic on that one. I mean, it's
going to be really hard to follow that because it's absolutely true. It's 1,000% true. Somebody says something. I mean, I could probably write a book about some of the experiences I've had at work. I had an issue with a coworker that I didn't even realize I had an issue with. And I guess I may have said something to her out of the way one time. I don't know if I just didn't say good morning in the right tone, but she was the secretary at a job that I worked. And I mean, the woman couldn't stand me. She just mistreated me left, right, and center. And I ended up finding out later that she actually had wanted my job, and she had wanted to be promoted from within, but she wasn't. So she really didn't like me to begin with. But I guess, we finally all sat down and I said, I don't understand why she's acting this way. So I wanted to be proactive. So I said, let's all sit down and have a conversation. And we did with my supervisor. And she had said something, I guess the secretary, I can't remember her name, had said something about, when you first started here, which was like a year ago, you said this. And I was like, kind of staring at her like, well, one, why didn't you address it then? And two, I mean, I didn't even remember this incident that she was speaking of because I was just, talking my usual blunt way. And I think holding on to stuff like that, I think maybe coming off of what Chezzy said is that just hanging on to something like that and building an entire idea about a person through that lens is completely unfair. I mean, there's in the neuromajorative world, there's, first impressions are everything is very, very common. But when it comes to neurodistinct people, I mean, we may have a different tone of voice or a different facial expression that makes you think something about us that isn't true. So it's really important to get to know the person, actually get to know the person instead of forming those, what is it called? Thin sliced judgments instantly about a person. There's actually a study on this that they did a study about people who saw, I think, videos and pictures of autistic people. They didn't know they were autistic. And they also had conversations with them, then they would bring them in and neuromajorative people would speak to neurodistinct people. And they did something about awkwardness and whether or not they would be friends with this person. And they said within seconds a neuromajorative person could tell that something was different about a neurodistinct person, and they automatically, based on that thin slice judgment, sort of dismissed them and was like, no, I don't, like, they're not necessarily mean, but they didn't want to know them. And I think that when we rely on first impressions, especially when it comes from neuromajorative and neurodistinct people, when we rely on that, it's often very, very inaccurate. And then you get this resentment towards somebody for years for something they may have said or done that you interpreted as being purposefully mean, when that's not the case. So I think that is a common issue. And then unfortunately, like Chezzy said, someone will feel that way, and then they'll start recruiting other people to feel that way. So they may not even know this person, but now you've got 5 people who dislike someone over something they said a year ago, and the person in question isn't even aware that that's happening.
That's so true, Jamie. I actually had an experience where I was at my annual appraisal and my boss called me into the office. She sat me down. She says, so how do you think this year's been for you? And I was like, I've had a great year. I love all the team. We get on really well. And she just looked at me and she said, oh, well, I've had 5 complaints about you, so we're going to go through them now. I was just like, seriously?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to say, whenever I hear that, it's a trigger for me. How do you think it's going? You know, once you hear that, it's going bad. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that, but I have been called into performance reviews and they're like, how do you think it's going, Jamie? And at first I didn't know. I was like, oh, it's great. I like working here. Blah, 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 blah. And so it's a trap. And I don't think that I don't think supervisors should call in their employees and say that, because to me, that's cruel.
Yeah, I felt really stupid afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think it's cruel, and I've seen it happen here. It definitely has happened. We get performance reviews. Well, how do you think everything's going? Everything's great. People hate you here. What? It's very jarring, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a power play, if I can be so bold.
Yeah, that's actually, now you said that, that was the same boss that I talked about earlier, who said that I knew she didn't like me because she felt threatened by me. But yeah, but when she read through her list, there were 3 things on there that I did do. And I was like, yeah, I did that. But that was like at the beginning of the year. You should have just said if you didn't like it. And one of the things I did, we were working in a specialist nursery, and there was a digger, and a little child who was nonverbal just wanted to be with the digger. And he was using his textbook to communicate that he wanted to watch the digger. And his teaching assistant wouldn't let him. And so I got really annoyed, and I was like, well, you're a fun sucker. He's communicating that he wants the digger. And so when that got called up as my review, that someone had complained because I'd called them a fun sucker, I was like, yeah, they were. I'll own that. Just don't get it.
And that is what I absolutely love about our unique communication styles. Because you know what? Sometimes you are a daggum fun sucker. Just own it. But I think Chezzy and Jamie, you both are highlighting something that is really important in this conversation. Number one, that triangulation is occurring in the workplace. And instead of having an open, vulnerable, brave, and sometimes uncomfortable conversation with someone about how you feel about communication, you go to everybody else because you're trying to make yourself feel better and validate whatever you feel and think is right, quote unquote. And then what you're doing is creating these feelings of contention and dislike for someone you may not even know. And then that directly shows up a year later in a performance review. And the person who has no idea, because no one has had the decency, no one's had the gumption to have this conversation and to get to know them and go, hey, were you having a bad day? I kind of just like that. It really kind of hurt my feelings. And I don't know if that's what you meant. The story I was telling myself was this, and that probably isn't what you mean, but can you help me? Can you tell me more? Maybe I'm missing something. And just have that conversation, because then what you get is somebody that gets blindsided in a performance review saying, well, how do you think the year went? And you're like, oh, it's fantastic. I had a great year. And they're like, yeah, well, you suck and everybody hates you. I mean, essentially. And that's putting your job in jeopardy. And that's putting the way that you feel and see yourself in jeopardy. You're truly harming another person in a really detrimental way. And is that really what we're going for? We're at work trying to do amazing things. We're in a help industry. We're in a service industry. We're in a place where we are doing things in the world to be a part of creating things that are going to be innovative and elevate humanity for the most part. Some of us are showing up and making widgets, and we're happy with that. Okay, great. But let's do it in a way we're not undermining, undercutting, and we're not creating environments that are not psychologically safe for anyone, because this happens it happens to predominantly those of us who are different, but it happens to everybody to some degree. And I think that's really important. Allie, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Carole Jean, I just want to piggyback on that. I think you're talking about psychological safety, and then also, you want a culture where people are allowed to be in a bad mood and own it, right? And be able to say like, sorry, I was having a tough day, or this is going on at home. But I think what I'm hearing from Jaime and Chezzy's stories too is, if in the moment someone said something, like Chezzy's like, yeah, I'd still own it. But she's not saying it in a like mean, like defensive, I'm trying to argue with you. I'm sure you'd even bring up your point more like, actually, I truly believe this is what the child is looking for. I feel like that form of communication is valid. Let's do that for a little, right? And I think just those two examples really highlighted that to me. I think almost a neurodiverse person is going to be more open to that, because they're like, oh, okay, let me tell you what my thought process was and we can move on. It's not going to be this internalized, crazy dialogue. And I think, Carole Jean, you're also just talking about performance reviews are great, like the structure of them. And I do think companies are trying to adjust this, but it's not supposed to be this end of the year, I've collected all the crappy things you did, and then we talk about it at one time. It's supposed to be like a manager should be having a decent amount of conversation. And I think, a manager can kind of, I don't ever remember if it's nip or nib in the butt, whatever, stop it by having a culture that's like, I want everyone to be able to come talk to me, but I'm not going to be like the mom between two employees. Like, let's be in a place where we can talk to each other and say like, I really like that Carole Jean, she says this all the time, and I love this. I'm hearing from you that you're really annoyed that I didn't answer that email yet. Is that accurate? Like, is that valid? Or maybe I'm just internalizing it, right? But if you just say it like that, it just opens it up for the person to be able to say, well, yeah, I am, because you also maybe didn't do blah, blah, blah. And I can understand then, oh, I get why you're frustrated. I wasn't prioritizing that. I didn't realize that it negatively affects your workflow. And then you can have a conversation. So yeah, I think, Carole Jean, going back to what you're saying, like it's just being brave and having an honest conversation. But to Jamie's point, that can be scary. So it's really the whole company's job to make that feel like that's something you can say without being labeled as difficult, argumentative, not productive, whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of labels. And that's then hard, because once you have that label, you have to work to not have it. And I guess what we're trying to say is, let's just prevent the label from happening.
I don't think that performance reviews in and of themselves are necessarily negative, but I think when you are hoarding a bunch of information for 6 months to a year about a person that you don't like what they do, and then you drop it all on them at once, it's almost like they're living in one world where things are going well, and you're living in, you barely tolerate this person and you've been considering firing them. And that, you go in and we're going to have our performance review. This is great. I mean, after like one in my life, I think I started, being worried about all of them, because it was such a huge difference. And I've noticed that as a neurodistinct person living in a neurodivergent world. I said that wrong. A neurodivergent person living in a neurotypical world, I'm used to that language more than I'm used to Carole Jean's vernacular, which is probably easier for me to say. But there is one of the things that I posted on my Instagram. My Instagram is The Articulate Autistic, and I always have these conversations and these dialogues about, as an autistic person, have you gone through this? And one of the more common traumas that autistic people go through is not understanding the reactions people have to us. So we may intend one thing and get a completely opposite reaction, which causes our bodies to go into fight or flight because that's not what we were expecting. It's like a neurotypical person walking down the street and suddenly a bear is in front of them. It's just that shocking. And I think there's this assumption in the workforce that, oh, well, they know what they did. They know that they're being, mean, or they know that they have that facial expression on their face all the time. They know how their tone of voice sounds. They don't care. So people build up this story in their heads, and then they build that up for 6 months to a year. And then you have a performance review. Everybody, meanwhile, the autistic person's going home and going to sleep after work because we're exhausted from masking all day. Meanwhile, our team is going out maybe at happy hour and talking about what a bad person we are, what a bad employee we are. And we don't know. And so then all of that gets dropped on us all in one fell swoop, instead of taking someone aside and saying, okay, this is what's going on, kind of when it's happening, or at least, once a week or whatever you have to do. But when you just drop it on somebody like that all at once, it's really terrifying. It's like getting a cold bucket of water thrown on you, because if that keeps happening enough and you find out, oh, there's 10 things these people don't like about me, then you start thinking to yourself, am I going to have a job? Am I going to be able to pay the bills? Am I going to be able to keep my apartment? And I think a lot of people don't take that into consideration, that especially someone who is the CEO of a company, I mean, they probably make plenty of money and they probably have plenty of money in savings. Neurodivergent people, by and large, are unemployed. So when we do get a job, it is actually a threat to our physical safety if we are not communicated with regularly, like, this is what is expected of you, instead of just dropping it all on the person at once and saying, well, we're thinking of cutting back your hours, or you're getting a demotion, or here's your performance review, you're fired. That is an actual traumatic event for people. And I think that more supervisors and bosses and CEOs and people in the C-suite, I guess it's called, Carole Jean, really need to understand. You can't get so removed from your hourly employees that you don't realize that what you're saying to them effectively puts them into fight or flight. And then, especially dropping all that on them at once, it puts them into fight or flight. So if you have an employee who's constantly now scared, their performance is going to also drop too. So you're actually doing your whole company into service by communicating in that way to your employees.
Chezzy, what are your thoughts?
I agree with everything that Jamie's just said, but what's also important is that there have been times where I've had that like unexpected reaction from somebody, and I've said to them there and then, have I done something wrong? Have I upset you? And they're very much like, oh no, not at all. It's all fine. And it's not. And it's like, that's not fair. That's cruel. And it's all very well having all your lovely posters up saying that you're kind, you're caring, you're everything else. But if you're not living and breathing it's what's the point?
It goes back to that alignment one. Allie, what are your thoughts?
I was just going to say, Chezzy, it's cruel. And I think what people have to do is, I think socially, right, that we're not really supposed to critique. We're supposed to keep on like a certain face, right? Everyone kind of knows what I mean by that, right? But what we're actually saying is that is more damaging. So if someone's vulnerable enough to ask, you have to give them some information. Like Jamie, when you were talking, I was thinking it never goes well if you're fighting with your partner and then you bring up something from 3 weeks ago. Like they're like, no, you can't throw this in now. This is not what we're fighting about, So it's that same concept. You can't hold these feelings. And I would also say to people to check, what is that feeling about? Like if I was a little short with you, is that your own people pleasing? Is that, like, did that person actually do anything that truly offended you? Or are you having some sort of reaction in yourself that isn't about them at all. And kind of to everyone else's point, don't spread that. Like gossiping is just not okay. We're adults. But yeah, Chezzy, I love that you're saying it's cruel. And I really hope people take that. You are not being kind by not directly saying what's happening. It's more hurtful.
And I think one of the things that I think is important to point out is that Chezzy was saying, you know, and I've done this. I got to the point very early on in my career when I was working outside the home was, have I done anything to offend you? Is there anything wrong? And not only would I get met with everything's fine, and then still find out later that things weren't fine. People had this erroneous belief in their head that I was sarcastically asking, oh, did I do something to offend you? As though I was literally saying, I know I offended you, but I know you're not going to say anything about it, which is not how I operate. If I ask somebody, have I done something to offend you? I'm giving you the floor. I'm giving you the opportunity. Hey, no, I really want to know. Did I say something? Because there's this belief, like, let's say I did say something just then, or I had, most of the time it's a look or a tone. I have RBF, and I'm sure you know what that means. And I'm the kind of person who I have to put inflection in my voice on purpose because there is no inflection naturally. And so I may say something out of the way, or they take it as out of the way. And I'm like, okay, I said this thing. And then they'll turn around and have a reaction to me. And instantly I'll be like, did I say something to offend you? And I think in their mind, and I can kind of understand it. In their mind, it's like, you literally just had this face. You literally just had this tone of voice. And then you have the audacity to ask me if I've done something to offend you. So I can understand the other side of it. But when it's something like that has to be worked on. There has to be a way to realize that when, especially a neurodiverse person is asking, did I offend you? It's like, we genuinely want to know. We're not being sarcastic. We're not saying, haha, I know I offended you. There's no malice behind that. We genuinely want to know. So I just really wanted to put that out there because it's so important. And it's a component I think that's missing a lot.
Yep. Chezzy. And of course, Jessica's in there going, yep, you're speaking the language, Jamie.
Yeah, when you were saying about your face, my face gets me into trouble so often because it will create the face that, like, you know, your internal monologue of the things that you think but you'd never say out loud. Well, my face kind of just says it anyway. And I was at a workplace and someone had come in with their new baby. I don't like babies. They scream, they make a lot of noise. But what I didn't realize, so she's there with her baby, like everyone's cooing over it. Apparently I went and moved. And somebody saw it and was like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, oh, did I really do that? And still now I feel so bad. I'm a bad person.
No, you're not. I can so relate. I have, like, sometimes I cannot, it happens before I can stop it. And I know exactly what you mean so much. So, all right, I do this. This is part of who I am and what I do in the world. So I'm going to make everybody real uncomfortable for just a minute. Get ready. Here it comes. Jamie's like, oh God, Carole G. If you are a business leader, if you're a business owner, if you are the head of a company, I want you to hear this. This is really important. I am the head of a company. I run a team of people. And this is the same thing I had to ask myself. We're going to talk money. We're going to talk the bottom line right here. We're going to get real granular because everybody's always saying it's always about the bottom line. It's about the numbers. It's the KPIs. It's the return on investment. It's the ROIs. Let's get real granular about why communication is so important and it really impacts your bottom line. Number one, if you are saying we hire for neurodiversity, we are inclusive, be inclusive, hire for neurodiversity, put in the frameworks because you're benefiting from our amazing brains, the flow that we get in, the ability that we have to complete high-level tasks that may take teams. And I just spoke with someone who is in tech, who is a coder, and she said, I can do in 4 to 6 hours what takes my team 2 to 3 weeks to do. So guys, I want you to know this is really important. If you're benefiting and your bottom line is benefiting, and it will benefit from having and including neurodiverse brains, you have to look at all of it. You have to look at the communication component. You have to look at the supports and the frameworks that are in place. Number one, reasonable adjustments. Folks, reasonable is subjective. And you get real uncomfortable because you're thinking, what's the risk? What am I having to do legally? What am I on the hook for? Is this going to cost me a fortune? Is this going to eat into my budget? No. 9 times out of 10, an adjustment or an accommodation that someone is requesting is free. It maybe takes a little bit of extra effort or time on someone else's part. If you are a company that is looking for neurodiversity, you see the benefits. You know that there are, because right now we are moving into a time of economic recession and inflation. Hiring is slowing down. I don't care what your neurotype is. If you are employed in a company right now, you're looking around and you're going, okay, so they just let a couple of people go. They've got a hiring freeze. And this is like everybody the cheese is standing alone. Everybody that's here, this is all that's going to be here through the end of the fourth quarter. And we've still got all these projects to do. And you're looking at a higher demand. In those moments, effective and good communication between everyone is more paramount than any other time. And companies and research is showing that companies in economic recessions who are neurodiverse and who are the most inclusive fare through these times much better because they have better and more effective communication. They have people who are looking and solving problems from different perspectives and different brains. So if you just got real uncomfortable for a second, I'm not apologizing for it. You want to talk about your bottom line? Let's get granular and really talk about what affects your bottom line. If you're going to be neuro-inclusive, be neuro-inclusive. And if you're not sure what that really means, contact the NeuroDrive team, contact Thrive, reach out to one of us, have us come in. We can look at your company. We can tell you, hey, you're doing this really well. This is a place you can tweak it. This is a place that we can put in some frameworks to support everyone that's here. And it's going to elevate your bottom line. Your ROI is going to increase. Your retention rates are going to soar. These things are possible, but you got to get a little uncomfortable and you got to be willing to look at what's not working and how you can make them work. And you got to make sure you're asking the right people because your lens may not see the solution. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to give all of the panelists a moment to sort of say their last thoughts on this as we are wrapping up this incredible conversation on communication between different brains in the workplace. We're going to ask our guest, Chezzy, to sort of add whatever insights and thoughts that you have as we're wrapping up today.
No insights. I just want to say it's been a really interesting conversation and I've really enjoyed meeting you all and it's been a real pleasure. So it was worth coming off me hollybobs.
I love it. Thank you for coming off your holiday to join us today. Miss Allie.
No, thank you also. This has been a wonderful conversation. Something I talk to really quick because it's an easy one that I talk to companies about. Processors tend to look up and to the right when they're processing, and it's perceived a lot as you're ignoring me or you're not listening. So I think that's something for people to know. It's typically I'm actually really trying to process and I can't look directly at you. I need to look up. So I think that's a good thing for management to know. It's just a nice tidbit that could be being perceived the wrong way right now.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a really good one because I do that. I'm like, thinking about it.
Same.
Jamie.
I just, again, agree to echo everyone's sentiment. This was a great conversation. I did have something to leave off with, but unfortunately I also am ADHD and now it's gone. I hope it wasn't that important. Oh, I know what it is. Please assume positive intentions. I think if I could leave any supervisor with any bit of wisdom is assume positive intentions from your employees, from everyone who works with you, instead of automatically assuming it's a negative thing. You'll always do better and you'll serve your employees better if you assume positive intentions and you clarify what you think is going on instead of just reacting to it.
Oh, very insightful. I cannot say thank you enough to this amazing group today. Thank you for our incredible chat there in the live chat box. Thank you for everybody that joined us today. Wow, we have had some great comments, some great engagement, people sharing what their experiences have been. And you know what? You make this conversation possible each and every day, because we're not just here talking at each other and at you. We want to have a conversation with you. So thank you so much for joining us in the chat box. Thank you for engaging in this conversation and really taking part. And we hope that you take what you learned today and you take that back out into the world and share it with another person, because that's really where the communication happens. Thanks so much for joining us. Take care, guys.
Chezzy, really nice meeting you.
And you, thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry, guys, it takes a second for me to end everything. There we go.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
We're wrapped up. Sorry, it took a second for me to get it.